Learning about Gemara. Today, Monday's daf is daf Kuf Gimel. We learned yesterday that there's a dispute between the Seicher, the masker, the renter, and the landlord. Seicher claimed he paid. The landlord said, "You never paid me." That we actually believe the Seicher. We say to the Seicher, "Swear that you don't owe the money." And we learned yesterday that if there's a dispute between the renter and the landlord, and the renter claims he paid, the renter swears and doesn't have to pay because he has a cheskes mammon. The money is sitting with him, and therefore he just swears and he keeps the money. So now the Gemara continues another case. Amar Rava, 4 lines from the top, Daf Kuf Gimel Amud Aleph. Amar Rava says, Rava, Amar Rav Nachman, name Rav Nachman. Hi man, the oigele beitza lechabri. Let's say Reuven rents out his house to Shimon le'eseshnin for 10 years. Because he writes a document. The way Rashi learns, and Rabbeinu Chananel in one pshat and others learn, there was no dates on the document. It just said 10 years, no starting date and no ending date. But on Malay, and then he says to him, Nikitet Chomeshanim. Then he says to him that you're holding on to it already 5 years. The landlord says to the tenant that you already have it for 5 years. We believe the landlord. What happened was the tenant says, I've only been here 3 years. I have 7 years to go. The landlord says, no, you've been there already 5 years. In this case, we believe the landlord, not like the previous case where we believe the tenant. Now, what's the logic behind that? Why do we believe the landlord? So you're telling me because there's no dates on it, it seems we believe the landlord. So what would be a similar case where you have a loan? Let's say he lends $100. Reuben lends $100 to Shimon in a document, and the borrower says, "I paid you back half." You should believe. Over here, the same thing. You're telling me that the land, we don't know who it is, and you tell me that even though the landlord, the owner of the land, says you've been there already 5 years. I've already paid you half of what it says in the start. I'm supposed to give you for 10 years. I already gave you 5. You believe him? If the borrower says I already paid you half the loan, we believe the borrower when the lender says it's not true. On Malay, what are you comparing? The point of a loan, a contract loan, is that to prove you owe me the $100. If you pay me back half, then imisa the pore. Then if you did pay me back half, we should have wrote something inside the document, or give me a receipt, something, evidence that part of it was paid. Over here, in this case, it's very different. You know why it's different? The owner of the land can say, you know why I gave you a document? I gave you the land for 10 years. You know why I gave you a document? Not to benefit you, so you have, it's to prove that, that whatever I gave you 10 years, it's to benefit me. I don't want you to come tomorrow and you're going to say that you bought the land and you've been there for 3 years. So I'm having a document where I wrote a document where it says clearly that this land is on loan to you for 10 years. And this way, it's to benefit me. And that's why the owner of the land is believed. I wrote your document, you shouldn't go ahead and grab and say it's yours forever. And that's why. So therefore, of course, it's a very different in case of a loan. So the owner of the land says, you've been there already 5 years, we believe the owner of the land. That's how Rashi learns. Others learned opposite. Others learn the way we believe not the owner of the land, but the person who's occupying the land. Because if the pshat is the way, and they don't like the Hopshah Rashi because they find it difficult. One of the difficulties is, so why doesn't the person occupying the land has a migas? Since he's holding on to the star, he could have hid the star and then say, look, I bought it from you, all right, but here already 3 years, and you weren't protesting. And there's no document, because the only document is sitting by the occupier. So they learned the Gemara exactly the opposite. The star is sitting with the owner of the land. The star is with the owner of the land. And it says exactly, it says there that this land is rented to you for, let's say, $100, $10 a year. And after 5 years, the renter says that, and they argue about how many years he already rented. And the renter says, I already gave you 5 years worth. And the renters believed with the shua. The renters believe with the shua because you want more money. You're saying you only gave me money for 3 years, and the renters only gave money for 5 years, and the renters believe with the shua. Then it makes sense why the Gemara is here, because this is a continuation of yesterday's Gemara, where the renter says, I paid you away the rent, and we believe the renter. Anyway, continue the Gemara. Interesting case here. Following up, the Gemara says, "Oh, Rav Nachman says." Same to Rav Nachman. Another case, Rav Nachman. Shoyil adam betuvel oilam. A person borrows from someone else an object. According to some Rishonim, what he's saying is, I'll owe you a favor forever. We didn't give any time limit. Here, borrow me, lend me this object, and I'll owe you a favor forever. Or the way Rashi learns, and he says to me, lend me this object as long as the object is betuva useful, it's good for me. And the guy said, okay, no problem. Which means there's no deadline and the borrower can keep it forever. Keep it forever. And even if he gives it back to the lender, he can take it right back from the lender again. So this is the lender agreed to lend it forever, and the lender can't change his mind. And in fact, the son of the daughter of Shmuel, remember she's the one who was taken captivity, and then one of the captors there lived with her. So Rav Modi was saying, this is the son of the daughter of Shmuel. I want that if the Bailey made a king with him, said, yes, you can use it as long as it's useful, then the borrower can use it forevermore. And furthermore, if it breaks down eventually, he doesn't get to keep it. He has to give back the broken parts or the handle. And according to some Rishonim, he can't go ahead and fix it up because they're saying the whole handle has to give back. He can't take repair it and continue using it. Interesting, machlekes Rishonim. If the lender says, if the borrower is not using it, does the lender have the right to say, well, you're not using it, I want it back while you're not using it? Or the borrower can say, sorry, it's with me all the time, and therefore I don't have to give it back to you. And in fact, if the lender then it takes it back and he has an action by the lender, does the lender have to pay it to the borrower? Very confusing. Amar Rabba says Rabba. Hi, Mando Amalachabri. Somebody says a friend, Oishlan Mori Lemipik Behaipa said, lend me a shovel. I want to dig around this particular pardis, this orchard. Rav Be'avidisa, then of course when I borrow it, I can use it for that orchard, no other orchard. If I say pardisa, a orchard, then an orchard, then without designating which one, and then Rav Be'avidisa the boy. He can use for any orchard he chooses, even the biggest one, it doesn't matter. Pardisai, if he says my orchards in plural, then Rafik was a called pardisa easily. He can then use it for all the orchards that he has. If it breaks down eventually, and it's mesa mach malacha because it happened, over time while you're doing its work, and then you just bring it back, even the handle or the bits and pieces. Somebody says, if somebody says, lend me this, I want to use it to irrigate my fields. The nufflet collapsed. He has no right to rebuild it and continue using it. Only this what do you call it? This gargusa, now that it's no longer here, if you build a new one, it's a brand new one. It's not the same one, so you have no rights to it. What about gargusa? He didn't say this gargusa. It's just generally, lend me a well, and then enough to collapse. Bonila, he can rebuild it, and he can still using it. Because he didn't say this gargusa, he says a gargusa. Well, this is still your gargusa, even though I rebuilt it, so I can still use it to irrigate my fields. If we say Begagusa, you say, give me a field, an area that has a number of wells there, or places to dig wells, then he can continue digging and looking for, digging bores, looking for spring water, whatever it is, until he locates the proper, a good water base. And then, but first, in order to be able to do that, to dig in somebody else's property, you have to make a kinyan that he gives you permission to use the land. Because otherwise, it's merely words, and the guy can always change his mind. And it's not a case of Mishapur or anything like that, it's only words. And it's not even a case of lack of faith, because you're ruining my field. Mishnah. Let's say if somebody Reuben rents a house to Shimon, the nuff on the house falls down. Since I rented you a house for 12 months, I got to give you a house. If the house collapsed, I got to rebuild it and give you or another house. If the house is small, I said, don't make it larger. God large, I said, cotton, don't make it small. The renter can say, I'm not comfortable in the small. I need a big house, or I don't want a big house too hard to clean. I want a small house. And the renter has a right till his lease expires. If there was one house that don't build 2 units, 2 units, don't make one house out of it, the renter can prevent him doing all that, make any amends. Don't diminish the number of windows, nor add them. Let's both agree, because the renter has full rights until his lease expires. It's cheaper to give him money to rent another place in the meantime, so you can build whatever you want. Hey, Chidami. What are we talking about? If you told him this house, if it collapsed, also like, goodbye, too bad. This house is no longer in existence. I don't know anything to the renter. A house, I'll give you one house. If I said I'm going to give you a stamp, sorry, said buy a stamp. I said I'll rent you a house without specifying the house. So if there was one house previously, why can't I build two? Just because you lived in a bigger house before, we didn't make that up. You were lucky. So why can't I change it? Or cotton was small. Why can't I make it larger? Seems to me larger, you can't make it small because you're cramping his lifestyle. But if it's small, why can't you make it larger? What happened was he said, Shani Maskla, the house that I'm renting you, and he gave all the dimensions. Meters, the length. So what's the chid? If you spelled out all the dimensions, of course you cannot amend it. That's all written in the contract. And like he also Ravi said name is Lucky. He said to him, Bayis Kaze Animas. Not I didn't write the dimension. All I said was a house like this I'm going to rent out to you. So therefore, it has to be similar. Says the same question. If I said a house like this, of course you have to continue giving him a house like that, similar. Can't change it, make two houses instead of one, and so on. I couldn't know. It happened to be near the water, near the beach. And people sometimes prefer living on the beach. They don't really care so much about that conditions of the house itself. The main thing is the location. Location is the most important position for the physician. So we would have thought that the main emphasis here is not so much on the house what you rented to him, it's the location. So now that I'm rebuilding the house, I can do whatever I want, even though I said like this. So when I said like this, I meant in this position, but not necessarily the house. My kazeh, when he said like this, I good to the here along near the beach. No, in every detail as well, it has to be similar. Hadron Haloch Hashayel. We completed the Perek of Hashayel, and now we're continuing the Perek of Hamakabel. A makabel son mechaveda is talking about a sharecropper. Have an arrangement of a half, a third, a quarter, and generally speaking, we'll see more a bit the difference soon. But generally speaking, the sharecropper gets less than the owner of the land. The owner of the land might get a half. The best, the sharecropper gets half. Usually, the owner of the land gets, let's say, 3/5, and you get 2/5, or whatever the arrangement is, 3/4 versus a quarter. The owner of the land usually gets I guess the majority of the profits of the yield. So sharecropper works on the yields. So the meaning is that the person, whoever the sharecropper is, has to harvest and not uproot it with his hand, but to harvest yikzer, which means to leave some weeds behind, all that. The meaning is la'aka, to pull each one out, I guess by hand, pull it out with the roots, and yaka, that's what you should do. If the meaning is lachresh, the meaning is that after you harvest, you go ahead and you plow the land, so this way you get rid of all the residual plants and weeds and all that, then yachli should do that. Hakolki meaning you got to follow the laws of the land. Why repeat it again? You just said Mokush Snuggle. We'll see later. Just like the sharecropper divides with the tfu itself. Kach cholkin beteven ubekash. They also then Kevin is straw that's already been detached, so maybe make bales out of it, and kash is the straw that's still attached to the ground. Just like when we divide the wine that I produce, kacholkin bismayers. We also, the sharecropper divides with the owner the branches. Uve kanim and kanim. Kanim are the pieces of wood that hold the vines. Don't really grow on the ground; they grow on this. I forgot what it's called already, alongside of the wall. And you have these sticks that you put the vines on to hold them. That's called kanim. And they both divide that. Ushneim is sapkin kanim, and both have to provide the kanim in the first place. When it comes to the seed, sometimes the sharecropper, as Pesach will explain, where the sharecropper does not provide the seeds, the landowner does, then the landowner gets the majority of the crop. But here the sharecropper brings his own seeds and he brings everything himself, then the sharecropper can get equal to the landowner, or sometimes even more than the landowner, because of the expense. We learned if the minig is to harvest, you're not allowed to go ahead and pull out your weeds. That both can prevent each other from changing your ways. You have to follow the ways of the land, whatever the ways of the land are. If the minig is to harvest, now what's the logic behind it? If the minig is to be kaitzer, why can't you change it and be oikel? Oikel has an advantage. You get rid of the weeds and everything else. There must be an advantage in harvesting over ktsira. And the Gemara explained there is an advantage, and that's why if the meaning is to harvest, I can say to you, I want you to harvest and not to pull out. And what is that? I want the straw to remain behind. I wanted it because it turns into fertilizer, and therefore I want you to stay there. But if the owner, let's say, says I want you to change, the other guy says like I know it's too hard for me to go ahead by hand and to pull them all out. I'd rather be kaitzas. Each one has a reason to say I'd rather than they convert the other one from changing because I'd rather harvest. Then it says in the Mishnah, if the minig is to that you cannot change to go ahead and harvest. This one says the reason why I prefer the akira, which is a local minig, is because it cleans my land out. It's clean. And the other one says the other one says, I know I'd rather to stay there. Also, another reason why the sharecrop says, I also would rather have, even though you want me to change to consider, I want to leave it okay because I want those pieces to be there. My animals should have feed to eat. I want some straw for my animals. And the shneim, and I want to pull the whole thing out. I don't want to do a harvest, leave pieces in. I want to pull the whole thing out so my animals have what to eat. So shneim akazeh. Now the question is, so each one can prevent the other one. So normally, since we already learned that you're not allowed to change, so then, of course, they can prevent each other from changing. He's explaining why can't you change. There's an advantage one way over the other. So he explains each one has an advantage, and therefore, if I prefer the local meaning, you cannot force me to change to another way. Matam likta in shalaka and laka. I'm explaining why each one cannot change. Each one has an advantage over the other way. So that's the local way. Meaning, I can stop you from changing it. Lachrish achrav yachid, meaning afterwards the plow. We plow. Pshita isn't that obvious? If that's the meaning to plow after the harvest, that's obvious. More so the chiddush here is loy. No, we need it. Ba'asra the loy menachshi in a place that after the harvest they don't weed out at all. But he went voluntarily, the sharecropper, and weeded it out. So he can say, look, you're right. Normally we plow the field afterwards to get rid of all the weeds, but I already did my hand. So why do I have to plow? Now he said to him, you know why I worked so hard and I weeded out by hand. I don't want to go and plow. It's a big job to go plow all over again. That's what your intention is. You should have specified before you went into this deal. Everything follows the laws of land. What are you coming to add? We already said to add the following. When I, let's say, go ahead, a wheat field, and there's also a couple of trees growing there. If the minig is the trees are included with the wheat field. That the land, that the sharecropper has a right to take some of the fruits from the tree as well, even though for picking fruits is much easier than working with the wheat. You don't have to work at all with it; just grows. So then that's the din. Then you follow the minig, and the sharecropper is entitled to get some of the fruits, even though you didn't make that up. And Mokum She'ein Ogla Haskin Ein Maskim. The meaning is that the trees are not included, then the sharecropper can say, oh, I expected to include the fruits of the tree. No, it's not. That's the meaning of place, even though we didn't speak about it. That's what it is, a sharecropper. Says we need it. The Kuli Alma, Yavi Betilsa. Let's say everybody. Now, interesting, in this case over here, the landlord said, the landlords take only a third and give the sharecropper 2/3. This is where the Rishonim say why over here the sharecropper is getting more, because the sharecropper uses his own seed. Okay, so the landlord takes a third, but Azaliyu, and in this particular case, the Yaveh Beniva, this particular case, the landlord took only a quarter. He was very generous, and he gave 3/4 to the sharecropper. So the landlord could say to the sharecropper, you know why I gave you why I was so generous? Because I want to keep the fruits. I'm retaining the trees for myself. That was my intention, even though he didn't spell it out. I would have thought he could have a valid argument. The very fact that isn't it self-evident? Why was he so generous? The reason why I took myself less is so that I shouldn't give you from the trees. Kamashalon, the boiler fushle should have spelled it out. You should have spelled it out. Said the Gemara, the meaning is that the trees are not included, that you don't have pshita, isn't that obvious? That's the meaning, not to include the trees, they're not included. No, in this area, the landowner only gets a quarter. In this case, the landlord took a bit more. He took a third. So the sharecropper could say, I assume the reason why you're taking more is because you're allowing me to keep the fruits. The reason why we gave you more is because I assumed I'm going to get the fruits. That's why I didn't object. You can't imagine things. You have to spell it out. If you deviate from the norm, you must spell it out. You can't take things for granted, make assumptions. Just like we divide in the tvua, so too we divide when it comes to the straw. There's different kinds of straw. Rabbi says the bubble nehige, the minig is lo yiba tibna larisa. In bubble, we don't give the straw to the others. That's the minig. Lamai nafkamina. Why my nafkamina? The ika inish the yoiv ein yafahu. If you ever see anyone above giving straw to the sharecropper, you should know he's a very generous man. Didn't have to, and don't start emulating him and start numen him, or don't think because he did it, everyone else has to do it as well. Amar Rabbi Abiyasi says, Bukhra. If let's say you build around the field, there's a ridge around the field, and then you fill it with sand in order to raise, to know where the boundary is. So you raise that ridge, higher than the land itself. That's enclosed by it. And then that's bukhra, and then metafsha, and then you added another layer a while later, and then the akafta, then you added a third layer a while later. That's called bukhra, tufsa, and akafta. And then the kone the chiza, and then you put poles all along this ridge because you're going to build a fence, and you're going to either fill it with thorns between one pole and the next pole so that people can go through or animals can go through, and you put all kinds of posts all around the field. Is these main posts? It all comes from the balabais. That's the main work, and that all comes from the landowner. But the actual horizontal, so let's say strings or thorns or things that you use to close these gaps, that's the arisa. That's who pays for that? The sharecropper. This is the rule. Kol ika balma, the main principal thing that you need for protection, and without it you can't walk ahead. That's the responsibility of the owner. The tirasa yiserta darisa. Anything extra over and above that, that's what the owners has to invest. It's his money. Because that's only to make it easier that he doesn't have to, guard it harder. Because you already have the main shmira. You already have a raised ridge and sand, so animals can't really cross into it. This is like an extra precaution. It's just to make the life of the artist easier. He can sleep at night, so doesn't have to worry about anybody coming in. So then it's his own benefit. He has to pay for that extra. Mama Rabbi says, Moro, he says, like a hoe was vilo or a shovel, the davla and a pail, and zanuke, and let's say a canteen that you use to fill the water, used to irrigate. The balabayit, these are all essentials. The balabayit has to pay for that. Arisa ovid beyaida. But let's say the role of the sharecropper is if there's a river near the field, he has to create the ridges that connect the river to the field. Because then it makes it a lot easier for him. He doesn't have to transport the water all the way to the field. He just transports the water, puts it in these little canals and these channels, and it flows to the field. So because it's to make his life easier, then the earth is one who's responsible for that. So I think about it further. What's kanim havitai? Where did kanim come in? Says the Gemara, kanim hamuchlokin. We're talking about kanim that are smooth. Meaning, if I'm talking about here, these are the kanim that you use to actually grow the grapes, and you attach the grapes on these posts, on these sticks. So they divide that because that's essential. Kani, Ushneim Masapkin is a kani. They both provided. Lumberly, what do you need that for? Since they're both going to divide at the end, so surely both have to pay for it from the outset. But why would one person pay and the other person then gets divided in between as well? So my answer is Matam Kama. The missions explain why. Matam Shneim Chelkim Bekan. Why is it that they both divide these sticks? Shneim Mesapkes Akan. They're both provided. Second one further on the Kabbal side of Mechaveda, if somebody receives a field from his friend, he based on Shalchin. There's two kinds of fields. One is called Zeh Baal, one called Zeh Shalchin. Zeh Baal is that there's enough rainwater that it can nurture the field, it nourishes the field, and you don't have to worry about irrigation. A base of Shalchin is a field that cannot rely on rainwater. It needs irrigation as well. It's a dry area, there's not sufficient rainwater there. And there's springs around the place that you have. So let's say you have a base of, let's say I'm a sharecropper on a base of Shalchin, or a base of Ilan, or it's a field made up of trees. and he's happy to work there, the sharecropper, because there are trees there, and it's very little work to have it grow. It's not like a field, a wheat field that you have to continuously work with it to make sure it grows properly. But a tree laden with fruits grows generally on its own. So the sharecropper is happy to enter the arrangement because he knows he's going to get all these fruits. And what happened was the spring, the source of water for the field, suddenly dried up. Or the tree that he was going to benefit from is gone. If this person is a chaykin, remember, is a fixed amount. Every year I'm going to give you 10 sa, regardless how many saw I was able to cultivate in this field. Whether I was able to cultivate 1,000 saw, I'm still going to give you 10. If I was able to cultivate nothing because there's a drought that year. But what happens over here, in this case here, that I went in the field thinking I'm going to get all these fruits, and suddenly the tree was cut down. Some terrible wind came and cut the tree down, or the water that's supposed to irrigate the field dried up. So I can argue, maybe I should, we agree, I assume that there'll be a tree there, so there'll be water there. I don't have to pay you this year. So he cannot deduct at all from whatever arrangement he made. Why? Because he didn't specify in the beginning, as long as there's a source of water or as long as the trees are there. He didn't specify. But if the owner said, I want you to go ahead and be a chayker on this particular base of shalchin, or on this field of trees. So he specified in the thing. He didn't make it conditional, but he said this field of trees, or he said this field that has irrigation next to it. The base shalchin means there is a source of irrigation. Then you have a shemayim, and he says, as if he made up. It's as if he made up that that's the basis for our agreement, and that's no longer there. The agreement falls apart. So, what exactly are we talking about? If you're going to say to me that what? That the river, the source of all the irrigation for this city, dried up. This is called a makas medina. If an accident happens that didn't just affect your field, that we say, oh, you're bad mazel, you're tough luck. The entire city was affected by it. Then the renter has a valid argument, says, look, it's not my fault, and therefore we have to change our agreement. Is a mayim not going to why taki can't be menaka to a name of later say makkah medina? It's not my personal bad luck. This is a makkah of the whole medina. For example, we'll learn later on. Locust affects it. He said, look, if locust affected the time, if the locust only affected your field, then you say too bad, it's your bad luck. But if it affected the whole area, then it affected the whole area. Says the Gemara, yeah. So I should deduct it. It wasn't the main source of water for the entire region. It was only your particular little source of water that was affected. So what happened was a big source of water, but then that water went to a smaller one, which is closer to the field, and that one dried up. So I was too far away to go to the big one to collect water, and therefore it's your bad luck. Can't have a taina. Says the Gemara further. The Amalei says to him, well, you could have still gotten water. Obviously, it's a lot more work. You have to go out to the larger source, which is further away, but too bad. We didn't make anything up. So one further, says, Hani Tarti Masnita Kamaisa. The first two Mishnahs is Mishkach. The first two Mishnahs we learned yesterday is referring to Bein Bechakra Nusa, Bein Bekabel Nusa. That was when we said before that the meaning is to harvest or the meaning is to plow. It doesn't make a difference whether you're a sharecropper or whether you're a chayker, that we have a fixed amount. Every year I have to give you from the fruits regardless of what the yield was. And exactly the same thing. However, the same thing applies to both. However, and including this Mishnah as well. If we made up about a base of shalchin or a base ilan, makes no difference with your sharecropper or whether you are a chayker. The dinim are exactly the same with the Mishnah we just learned. However, mekan ve'elech, from this Mishnah and onwards, is the isa bekablusa lesser bechakernisa. If the law is limited to a sharecropper, it does not apply to a chaker, and if the law is about chaker, it does not apply to sharecropper. As we will continue when we learn the future Mishnahs, we'll explain this Mishnah what's it talking about. But if he included the word Beis HaShachin, then we say, that's as if we made it conditional that there has to be a source of water. So you might ask a question. Maybe that's the name of the field. Maybe people refer to this field as Beis HaShachin. Where do you see in the word that he made it conditional that if there is water, then he's just a name. And how do you know that's the case? Because I'll show you. Why can't the landowner say Shema Ba'alma? When I said Beishach, I was just referring to the field that I'm talking about, but I'm not making it conditional as the source of water is up and running. Mila Tanya, didn't we learn in a Braisa, and we'll learn it soon in a few weeks about Basra. I'm going to sell you a base kur of dirt. Now, base kur is 30 saw. So you think the buyer thought he's getting 30 saw. Even though it's only 15 saw, the deal is a deal. Why? When he said base kur, that was what this place is called, a base kur, even though it wasn't a base kur. Sometimes you call this a 10-liter urn. In fact, it's only 8.5 liters, but that's what they call it. Nobody calls something 8.5. It's either, let's say, a 5-liter urn or a 10-liter urn. So if I call 10 liter, you can't come to me with claims, oh, but it's not exactly 10. It's 8.5, because that's what people call it. But who did a provided that's how it works. The people refer to it as a kur, even though it has a lot less than 30, so it's only 15. Krama ani moichlach. I'm going to sell you here a vineyard. Krama sounds like a vineyard, so you think you're getting grapes. Alpha There were no grapes here at all. Only pomegranate, whatever it was. He gave the deal's a deal. Why? As long as this particular orchard, this area is called a vineyard, even though there's no grapes there, then even though I use the word vineyard, kerem doesn't matter. That's what you're getting. You're only getting this particular field we're talking about. Pardes in Moichelach, I'm selling you a pardes. Alpha Vision, there's no pomegranates there. He gave the deal. Why? As long as this area is called the pardes, that's the deal. Alma, Leishma, Alma. See, it's a valid time. The owner can say that I called it that, but that's the name. Doesn't mean I'm giving it to you. No, same thing over here. I called the base of Shachin, not because there's always a constant source of water, or that because I made a deal and provided this water. No, name Leishma, Alma. I didn't tell you the name. Oh, Shmuel, like Kasha. It's not a question. Depends who said to who. If the owner of the land says that I'm giving you a sada base of shalchin, then he has a valid argument. He could say, I didn't mean it's conditional on having a source of water ongoing. I meant that's the land that I'm giving you. That's the land to be a sharecropper. It wasn't conditional. But the market. But if the chayke said it to the market, he said base of shalchin. Why would he call? He meant was, I want to make sure that there's a constant source of water. Otherwise, there's no deal. More explains. He just meant the name. That's what it's called. That's what it refers to. That he meant, I want to make sure there's a source of water there all the time. Ravina says, even with the machir, it depends. Because he said the word zeh, he said svei base ilan zeh, so the base of shalchin zu, by adding the word this. What do you have to add to this? So if he's saying this, it means where are they standing right now? They're standing right inside the field, and he's saying this field. So if he's saying this field, you don't have to give its name. Why call it Beis Shalchin? We know exactly what you're talking about. This, if we're standing in your house or in your office and we're having talking, so he says, I'm renting you your sharecropper Beis Shalchin. So he's telling you, we have many fields. The Beis Shalchin field. Okay, it makes sense. You're just giving it a name. But if we're standing in the field and you're saying this field is where you're going to be a sharecropper, why do you have to add Beis Shalchin? It's not just a description. It's as if it's conditional. It's as if the owner, even though the owner is the one who said it, because he added the word Shalchin, which is necessary, what he's really saying is that as long as there's water there, you're responsible to me. Okay, we'll stop here. Until tomorrow at 8 o'clock in Mitzvah Shem.